As the clock ticked past 11 p.m. on that fateful January night, an unsettling chill wrapped around Tiffit Court in Crestview, Florida. The air was thick with an ominous stillness, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves and the distant hum of a passing car. When Carrie Winkler pushed open the door to her mother's dimly lit home, she was greeted not by warmth, but by an eerie silence that clung to her skin like cold sweat. The unmistakable metallic tang of blood hung heavily in the air, and with each hesitant step, her heart pounded louder, a relentless drumbeat that would echo through her life forever. The January night air in Crestview, Florida, had a biting edge, carrying whispers of stories yet untold. Like a silent sentinel, the moon hung low in the sky, casting its ghostly glow over the rows of houses that lined Tiffit Court. A street ordinarily full of warmth and neighborly camaraderie now seemed oddly foreboding, as if holding its breath in anticipation of the tragedy that would soon unfold. Carrie Winkler, barely stepping into adulthood, was no stranger to the quiet tension that often filled her mother's home. Melissa Howard, lovingly referred to as Missy by those closest to her, was a remarkable woman who wore her responsibilities like a badge of honor. Her commitment to her children was unwavering, a fierce love that could move mountains. But beneath her calm exterior lay the scars of battles fought and endured, each one leaving an indelible mark on her spirit. That night, as Carrie and her boyfriend made their way to Missy's modest home, Carrie felt an unusual heaviness settling in her chest. Her mother's absence from their usual phone calls was unsettling, an interruption to the rhythm of their lives that seemed strangely out of place. The wind, sharp and crisp, picked up around them, whispering secrets as they approached the front door. Pushing the door open, Carrie was met not with the familiar comfort of her mother's presence, but with a silence so profound it seemed almost alive. The dim light that trickled through the house cast long shadows that danced eerily across the walls, accentuating the absence of life within. With each cautious step, an unshakable dread began to unfurl within her, a premonition of the horror she was about to uncover. The air inside was different, tainted with a metallic tang that was impossible to ignore. It was the scent of violence, raw and suffocating, clinging to the walls like a malevolent presence. Carrie's heart drummed painfully against her ribs, each beat echoing like a harbinger of the nightmare to come. In the dim light, she saw her mother lying on the floor, a sight so jarring and surreal that it felt like a terrible dream. Melissa Howard, a woman whose life had been defined by her kindness and strength, lay face down in a pool of her own blood. Her body, once full of life and energy, was now still, a haunting testament to a brutality that defied understanding. Carrie's breath caught in her throat, a strangled cry escaping her lips as she stumbled backward, her world collapsing around her. Her mother's body bore the marks of a vicious attack, beaten and stabbed multiple times, wounds that spoke of anger and betrayal. The cut across her throat was a cruel finality, a life extinguished in a moment of senseless violence. Melissa's story was one of triumph against adversity, a narrative cut short by a darkness that had come to claim its due. As a skilled nurse, she had dedicated her life to healing others, extending her warmth and care to everyone she encountered. In her community, she was a beacon of hope and strength, a woman who had faced life's challenges with unwavering resilience. Behind the facade of her sunny disposition, Melissa had fought battles of her own. The custody fight over her son, Taylor, had been a grueling ordeal, a legal and emotional war that had left its mark on her. But Melissa had emerged victorious, winning the right to provide her son with the life she had long envisioned for him. As the weight of the scene before her pressed down on Carrie, the reality of her loss began to sink in, a mother stolen away by an act of unthinkable cruelty. The home that had once been a sanctuary was now a crime scene, and the community that had rallied around Melissa in life would soon be drawn together again in mourning and outrage. The night pressed on, each tick of the clock a reminder that time moved forward even in the wake of devastation. For Carrie, for her siblings, and for the town of Crestview. The events of that evening would mark the beginning of a journey through grief and justice, a search for answers in the shadows of a brutal crime. As the moon watched over the sleeping town, the story of Melissa Howard's life and untimely death began to unravel, a tale of love, loss, and the enduring pursuit of truth. The killer must have been someone familiar, someone who could slip past her defenses with a smile or a familiar word. The town of Crestview, cradled in the embrace of the whispering pines and veiled by the cool mist that rolled down from the hills at night, was about to unravel this mystery. But for now, the town lay silent, the chill of winter seeping into its bones, and the air heavy with secrets yet to be spoken. Melissa Howard's house stood solemn and dark against the tapestry of the night. The living room, once a vibrant space of laughter and warmth, now felt like an abandoned stage after the final act, the echoes of past conversations hanging in the stillness. The faint smell of lavender from a recently extinguished candle lingered, a scent Melissa loved, a small defiance against the encroaching winter. The shadows crept in, filling every corner with an unsettling quiet, like a predator stalking its prey. The kitchen, where Melissa had spent hours preparing meals for Taylor's impending arrival, was a tableau of half-finished tasks. A cutting board lay forgotten on the counter, crumbs scattered like tiny ghosts against the polished wood. The refrigerator hummed softly, its light spilling out onto the tiled floor each time the door opened, a beacon in the suffocating darkness. But now, its hum felt ominous, a reminder of life's mundane rhythm, so easily disrupted. Outside, a crow cawed from the boughs of a towering oak, its call slicing through the silent night. It was as if nature itself sensed the discord, the wrongness of the scene unfolding within the walls of the house. The wind picked up, rustling through the leaves, a symphony of whispered warnings that went unheard by human ears. In the hours following that last conversation, time seemed to stretch and warp around the events that transpired. The minutes ticked by, each one a heartbeat echoing in the void, marking the transition from life to murder. It was as if the universe held its breath, waiting for the conclusion of a tragedy that had been set into motion long before, by forces Melissa could neither see nor control. In those crucial minutes, the world continued moving outside the confines of Melissa's home. Cars passed by, their headlights briefly illuminating the facade of her house before disappearing into the night, unaware of the darkness settling inside. Neighbors went about their lives, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath their noses, their windows aglow with the warmth of family dinners and evening routines. For Melissa, the reprieve she sought never came. Instead, she found herself ensnared in a web meticulously spun by those she knew, those she once shared her life with. The night air grew colder, the chills seeping through the cracks in her home, matching the icy fingers of fear creeping into her heart. Her hopes, her dreams for a future with her son, lay vulnerable on the altar of someone else's intentions. As the clock neared midnight, Crestview slumbered on, unaware of the sorrow that would dawn with the morning light. Melissa's house stood silent and still, a lone sentinel in a town about to be awakened by the news of a murder that would fracture its peace, sending ripples of shock and disbelief through its close-knit community. In the aftermath, when the sun finally rose, its light would reveal the fragility of trust, the consequences of a love gone wrong, and the depths of human malice. And as the investigation unfolded, the truth buried within those 2 mysterious hours would begin to come to light, piece by piece, as detectives peeled back the layers of deception to expose the heart of darkness that had taken root in Crestview. The affair itself was a tangled web of deceit and desire, a combustible mix of passion and secrecy. As the investigation delved deeper, the tension in Crestview crackled like a live wire, threatening to unravel the fabric of the town's sleepy normalcy. Chris Cadenhead's presence in Melissa's life was more than a mere complication. It was a potential powder keg with the power to shatter lives beyond repair. On that fateful night, The air inside Melissa's home was heavy with the scent of stale cigarettes and lilac perfume, a cloying reminder of the life that had once thrived within those walls. The investigators, steely-eyed and grim, meticulously combed through the scene, their movements swift and deliberate. Each creak of the parquet floor, each whisper of latex gloves against evidence bags, underscored the gravity of their task. Outside, the night was pitch black, a velvet shroud pressing down on the quiet suburb. The only sounds were the distant wail of sirens and the hushed murmurs of neighbors who had gathered in their pajamas and slippers, faces pinched with disbelief. They clutched mugs of cooling coffee, seeking warmth in the chill of uncertainty, their eyes fixed on the house where the unthinkable had happened. Inside, detectives navigated the chaos of Melissa's living room. Tables were overturned, books strewn across the floor like fallen leaves. The lamps, knocked askew in the struggle, cast eerie shadows that danced across the walls. The intimate violence of her death spoke volumes. This was not simply a murder. It was a statement, bold and unequivocally personal. The cacophony of forensic equipment hummed softly, a backdrop to the methodical collection of evidence. Each photograph taken, each fragment bagged, was a step closer to uncovering the truth. The crime scene was a jigsaw puzzle of despair, and with each piece gathered, a picture began to form. A picture of betrayal, of love twisted into something monstrous. Carrie, Melissa's daughter, stood outside, wrapped in a borrowed blanket. Her eyes, hollow and red-rimmed, stared blankly into the night. The world around her had shifted on its axis, and the emotional aftershocks threatened to consume her entirely. Her boyfriend, hovering close, offered silent support, a steady presence in a world that had suddenly become unrecognizable. In the sterile confines of the police station, Chris Cadenhead sat across from the lead detective, his face a mask of distress and confusion. Shadows pooled beneath his eyes, evidence of a restless night spent replaying the gruesome discovery over and over in his mind. Despite his protests of innocence, suspicion clung to him like a second skin. His voice, hoarse and trembling, echoed in the interrogation room. "I didn't do this," he insisted, desperation coloring his words. But the detective's gaze remained unyielding, probing for cracks in his story, for any slip that might reveal the truth lurking beneath his assertions. Back in the neighborhood, whispers of speculation and fear snaked through Crestview, threading their way into every household. Conversations turned to hushed inquiries and furtive glances, each resident wondering whom among them bore the darkness capable of such brutality. As dawn broke, painting the town in the soft, muted hues of morning, the community braced itself for the revelations the investigation would uncover. The truth was a double-edged sword, promising both relief and heartbreak. But what remained certain was the irrevocable change that had swept through Crestview, leaving in its wake a community forever altered by the shadows of that terrible night. And as the investigators pieced together the story of Melissa's final hours, the question loomed large. In a town where everyone knew each other, who could harbor such a festering malice, and why? The answer lay somewhere within the heart of Crestview, waiting to be unearthed from the tangled roots of love, betrayal, and unspoken rage. The air in Crestview hung thick with an uneasy silence, the kind that seemed to cling to the corners of every room, curling into the ears of those who dared speak of the unspeakable. As the investigation into Melissa Howard's death unfolded, each new revelation seemed to deepen the mystery until the very fabric of the town felt irreparably frayed. Taylor's testimony was a shadowy thread in this tapestry of uncertainty, recalling the presence of Cadenhead on that ominous night. His recollection of a bag, forbidden to his sight, was a haunting detail that lingered like a ghost in the room. It was a detail that seemed innocuous at first glance, yet suggested a world of hidden intentions and concealed truths. The memory of Caden's wife, her voice steady yet haunted, testified that he returned home between 9 o'clock and 9:15 p.m., a timeline that seemed to release him from suspicion. But in this place, time had a way of twisting itself into knots, warping reality and erasing clarity. Speculation about Melissa's pregnancy added layers to the narrative. Whispers of a child that was never to be, a promise of life extinguished before it could begin. The defense's cold assertion that her tubes were tied was a sharp counterpoint to the warm possibility of new life. This contradiction, hanging heavy in the air, only added to the tension, making it harder to discern truth from fabrication. As the years dragged on, the case grew cold. It lay dormant yet alive in the back of every mind, a reminder of failure and injustice. Investigator Richard Trent's frustration echoed through the community like a lament. "We didn't get anything back that's going to allow us to connect this to anyone," he had said, his voice carrying the weight of unsolved mysteries and restless spirits. The lack of physical evidence was staggering. A murder scene meticulously cleansed of foreign DNA, fingerprints, and a murder weapon. The killers seemed to have vanished like smoke, leaving behind only the echoes of violence. But the brutality of the attack painted a vivid picture of the killer's mind, a canvas splattered with rage and personal vendetta. The viciousness was unmistakable, a testament to a dark heart capable of unfathomable hatred. This was not the work of a stranger. It was intimately personal. Yet, without evidence, it felt as if shadows themselves had conspired against justice. In 2015, a decade later, technological advances breathed new life into the investigation, like the first thaw of spring after a brutal winter. The sweatshirt, a silent witness to the tragedy, held within its fibers the key to the mystery. A DNA match that pointed directly to David Russell Holbrook Jr. The revelation was like a bolt of lightning, illuminating the darkness and casting sharp relief on the narrative that had long been obscured. David Holbrook, the seemingly unremarkable program manager working on classified projects, now stood at the intersection of innocence and guilt. To those around him, he was a professional, a man who appeared to lead an ordinary life. Yet, beneath this facade lay a past marred by intimidation and malice. Investigators delved deeper into his alibi, unraveling inconsistencies that had once slipped through unnoticed. As they pieced together the puzzle, a chilling portrait of Holbrook emerged, a large man with a penchant for knives and military training that belied a capacity for violence. His presence at Melissa's doorstep 2 days before her murder, with threats hanging in the air like a storm about to break, now resonated with sinister clarity. The DNA evidence was the thread that pulled the entire tapestry together, weaving a narrative of betrayal and cold-blooded intent. The revelation was both a relief and a heartache, a confirmation of what the heart had known all along, yet a reminder of the years lost to uncertainty and fear. It was a testament to the inexorable march of time and technology, a reminder that even the most carefully concealed truths would one day find their way into the light. The quiet streets of Huntsville, Alabama, buzzed with an undercurrent of unease as law enforcement officials descended upon the modest home of David Russell Holbrook Jr. The crisp November air was charged with anticipation, the kind that precedes a storm. As officers approached the unassuming residence, the world seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the moment when doors would be knocked upon and the past, so carefully hidden, would finally unravel. Inside, Holbrook was no longer the man who lived behind a mask of ordinariness. The years had aged him, but the hardened edge of a once military life was unmistakable. His arrest, swift and decisive, shattered the fragile facade of normalcy and thrust him into a cold and unforgiving spotlight. It was a moment drenched in irony. For over a decade, he had evaded justice, yet now he stood caught in its unyielding grasp. The drive to the county jail was somber, punctuated only by the low hum of the patrol car's engine. The weight of the indictment hung heavily in the air, a testament to the tragic finality of Melissa Howard's life, a life extinguished in a brutal act that had robbed the world of her light. As Holbrook was booked in a Madison County jail, the atmosphere was dense with the collective sigh of a community that had long sought answers. News of the arrest rippled through Okaloosa County, echoing down the halls of justice where Melissa's family had spent countless hours waiting, hoping, praying. Their vigil had been long, but the arrest marked a turning point, a beacon in the darkness that signaled the beginning of the end for a man who had eluded accountability for too long. As winter gave way to spring, the courthouse became the theater where justice would play out. Holbrook's trial commenced in February 2019, a year that arrived like a lion, roaring with the promise of closure. Attention turned to the courtroom, where a tapestry of evidence was meticulously unfurled. The prosecution, led by an unyielding team of legal minds, wove a story that was as chilling as it was compelling. DNA evidence, once silent, now spoke with clarity from Melissa's sweatshirt. It was the thread that bound Holbrook to the scene, an insidious whisper that refused to be silenced. The prosecution painted a portrait of a man driven by malice, wielding his military skills not in service to his country, but against an unarmed and innocent woman. Every piece of evidence was a chisel against Holbrook's crumbling defense. Surveillance footage captured his erratic behavior on that fateful night. Furtive glances, hands that seemed to scrub away invisible stains. The jury watched, rapt, as the timeline of the murder unfolded with stark precision. The gaps in Holbrook's alibi yawned wide, like the void left in the wake of Melissa's death. Witness testimonies cut through the courtroom like a knife. Janice Burke, Melissa's attorney, recounted with poignant precision her client's fear after Holbrook's menacing visit 2 days before the murder. The image of Melissa, a petite figure, dwarfed by a man whose love of knives was only matched by his capacity for intimidation, wove a narrative of terror and resilience. And then, like the final act of a tragedy, the jury delivered its verdict. Guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. The words hung heavily in the air, a mix of relief and sorrow. For Melissa's family, it was a bittersweet victory. Justice had been served, yet it came with a reminder of a life unjustly taken. As Holbrook faced sentencing, the scales of justice balanced with a solemnity that reverberated through the courtroom. Life in prison. The punishment was fitting, yet it underscored the profound loss of a life cut short. Melissa Howard's refusal to yield to intimidation had cost her everything, but in the end, it was her courage that triumphed. Her legacy, intangible yet indomitable, would linger long after the courtroom lights dimmed and the world outside continued its inexorable march forward. The room was silent, save for the rhythmic ticking of the courtroom clock, each second echoing the passage of time, the weight of years, the burden of justice delayed yet finally delivered. As the gavel fell, sealing Holbrook's fate, the air seemed to shimmer with the unshed tears of Melissa's loved ones. The scent of polished wood mingled with the cold tang of relief and sorrow, a bittersweet perfume of justice. In that moment, the shadows of fear and doubt that had clung to the corridors of their hearts began to lift. Melissa's courageous spirit lingered, a whisper in the silence, a testament that justice, though slow, is inexorable.